Welcome to Business Unmuted, broadcast live on LinkedIn on Wednesday the 21st July 2021 and later shared on platforms including Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you miss it today, you can listen later while you're driving. I'm Caroline Theobald, standing in for Graham Robb, your usual host. He's taking some well-earned rest and is inviting me to chair today's discussion in his place. Enjoy your holes, Graham. Labour market statistics are up, not just nationally, but here in the North East. Yet, in a report by Deloitte, 70% of the women polled reported that they feared COVID could negatively impact their career growth. Is there an imbalance here? Why? How can it be rectified? Joining me today to perhaps find some answers to this, or certainly talk about how we can make the workplace more easily accessible regardless of gender, are a very impressive panel. May I introduce extremely briefly at this stage, as I'm sure we'll learn much more about them during this discussion, Simone Roche, MBE. She's here in the studio, obviously. She's the founder of Northern Power Women, Northern Power Futures, and the Power Platform. On screen, Steve Pearson, the founder and the executive chairman of Phusion IM, the Tees Valley-based engineering software provider. Also remotely, Jane Armitage, consultant at Jackson Law, and until very recently, the managing partner there. She was named Businesswoman of 2020 at the Tees Businesswomen Awards, a very prestigious accolade, and I'm sure during discussion, Jane, we will know why. Now, before we begin our discussion, I'd like to pay my own and our own tribute to Professor Jane Turner, OBE, the Pro Vice Chancellor of Enterprise and Engagement at Teesside University and the university's gender champion. For those who don't know, she died very prematurely 10 days ago. Many of us knew and loved her and admired her invaluable contribution to Tees Valley in general and Teesside University in particular. She was committed to the region's young people, particularly girls and young women, and demonstrated this through the Power of Women campaign, POW for short. She was the inspiration for its conception, and it has now been launched in her name in order to shift and lift the aspirations of girls and young women in the Tees Valley. We and they will miss her badly, and today's discussion shows how important her work was and will remain as the UK works towards achieving its ambition of levelling up. We need both genders playing an equal role in the job market, in society, in politics and in health. A recent report from Deloitte set out to understand the impact of the pandemic on working women. 400 women were surveyed from 9 countries. Deloitte reported that nearly 82% of working women believed that their lives had been adversely affected by the pandemic. Nearly 70% of those were concerned that their career growth may be limited as a result. That's on the one side. On the other, the most recent UK labour market statistics from the Office of National Statistics make for very positive reading, with the number of payroll employees showing another monthly increase, up 356,000 in June 2021 to 28.9 million. Here in the North East, we have more people on the payroll than the halcyon pre-lockdown days of February 2020, which is really quite something. And across the country, there's been an increase in the average weekly pay, packet, which is up by more than 7%. Potentially, and this is, I suppose, the other side, driven by inflation and the surge in job vacancies. Those vacancies have, for the first time in 15 months, surpassed pre-pandemic levels. Those figures from the ONS and anecdotes, stories, experiences I'm hearing from some of my contacts in the business community imply that some companies are really struggling at the moment to fill their roles. Steve, you founded and you work in a high-tech business. Can you tell us, just to start with, what you actually do? In a sentence, bring it alive.
Yeah, we build digital twins for massive oil and gas facilities, nuclear power plants, water industries. So we build the digital equivalent so people can do remote working, which we'll discuss maybe a little bit later.
And tell me, have you experienced this? Have you experienced that it's been difficult to fill roles with the right people with the right skills?
Yeah, I think we do tend to find in this area we've got a lot of software developers. So software developers are in demand. We know we need more software developers, but likewise in the COVID era, clients are slow to sort of move, and therefore you have to try and predict when you need those resources. And we do tend to find it'll take us about 3 to 6 months to actually find somebody and then get them up to speed with what we actually do. So it's quite a difficult challenge trying to plan the demand before the demand occurs.
I bet it is. And also, you just said that you've got quite a lot of competition, haven't you, for the best people. So are you actively putting things in place to make you particularly attractive to those highly skilled folk?
Yeah, I mean, I used to work for BP and ICI, some big companies, so I sort of know the sort of packages that people offer. We know the culture and the environment that people like to work in. And we do some very cutting edge, clever things which people find attractive. So all we have to do is just keep ourselves sort of current in terms of packages that we offer. We have like long weekend working and things like that. Working from home has been something we've been doing for a long time. So COVID was, we were familiar with the working from home. So that's all we can do really is offer the very best package that everybody else offers. But hopefully have a nice environment, friendly people, and somewhere where people enjoy working and find it challenging and interesting.
And you've sort of embedded that, haven't you? Because you've got something called the Phusion Way, which is all about your values and your guiding principles, which actually sort of set out your stall so that you manage what people might expect coming to work for you.
Yeah, and it's just all a combination of every logical thing most people do, So we work together as a team. We train people. We've worked together a long time. We do innovative and creative things. We can all take the lead, and we can all sometimes be the slave. So yeah, we just have a culture where basically, hopefully, we thrive in that environment. And everyone's equal, and everyone has a contribution to make.
That's great to hear. Everyone being equal is particularly something that I'm listening to, given, some of these stats that I've referred to very loosely. I mean, actually, the World Economic Forum has said as well that, UK is going backwards in terms of gender equality in the workplace. And the IT sector has got a bit of a reputation for not attracting in lots of young girls and young women. Have you found that? And again, are you trying to do something about it?
We're not actively doing something about it. We do obviously put out job vacancies. We interview the candidates. We're not really worried about the gender. It's more about the experience and the skills. So we have had female software developers and male software developers. But yes, I suppose there's more males around in the software world, but that's just there's not a lot we can do to foster more females into that role. But obviously when we put adverts out, it's for any gender that's available.
Of course it is, because you want the best person for the job regardless of their gender. Simone, gender is something that you've been working on, not just in the Northern Powerhouse region in the northeast, and then you've been taking some of these findings down to London and knocking on ministers' doors and saying, come on, we need to do more about equal opportunities for women in the workplace. Can you just tell us a bit more about that and what you've been up to recently?
Absolutely. Northern Power Women and Northern Power Futures is about levelling up and accelerating gender equality and social mobility from the north. We know we can influence from here. And so we wrote a levelling up report last year, and the whole premise of that report when we launched it was levelling up by powering on. And Jane, Caroline, you were both part of those power circles that we gathered these, and we went across the length and breadth of the north without even moving our screens. But the things that we found that were, women young people and businesses from female-led and Black Asian minority-led businesses were the most disadvantaged and impacted by COVID. And we know that 2/3 of unpaid working and caring falls to women, so it's become harder. So it's interesting to see the statistics. I think one of the challenges for Steve in IT is all about, I think there's a solution around role modelling. We're passionate about role modelling. The Power of Women campaign is about the power of role models as well. So I think that's what we've been doing. So when we spoke to a minister earlier this week, it was about taking this levelling up report that we brought out in the late autumn last year. It's not designed to be static on a desk. It's designed to have those conversations. And our ask were more seats at the table. We want more seats at the table. We want more support for female-led businesses and Black Asian minority-led businesses. And we want to really look at our young people because our young people are being at the moment there's a lack of confidence, there's a lack of opportunities, and we want something to be done about it. So it is more seats at the table. If we're making decisions about young people, women, entrepreneurs, then actually include us in the decision-making in the process. So when we spoke to Minister Scully at the start of the week, that was the ask for him, and that's what we ask, advocate, open doors, and let us in and let us be part of that decision-making process.
And I want to pick up on that actually, because if you look at the Tees Valley specifically and some of the statistics here and at the PACE report from 2021, girls and young women are not represented. They're not represented in the workplace. They don't have the same participation in adult education. Jane, you've been quite actively involved in this and trying to make people from both genders feel more welcome in the workplace at Jackson's Law. How have you gone about it?
We've gone about it in a number of different ways. We set up an apprenticeship program to invite people into the practice and to learn the skills that they need from us from day one. And we've worked with providers of apprenticeships, and we've put out videos with our current apprentices saying, "Look at me, I'm just, I went to school at the same place as you did, and look what I'm doing now." So we've done a lot of promotion in that regard. We've worked with organisations like the Girls Network, and we're doing some mentoring. So a number of our partners are mentoring girls in the area. We work with High Tide, which is another charity in the Tees Valley, and we've invited school children into the practice. This is obviously pre-COVID, but we've done it online actually during the pandemic, and we've invited them in, and we've done fun exercises with them and said, "Look, you can do this. This is what it's all about." And I think it's breaking down barriers, because people think that it's really scary walking through the door of a law firm, and actually it's really not. And we need to send people out and say to them, "Look, this is, there's nothing scary about this. It's a lot less scary than the job centre. So come in and, talk with us and realise that everybody is just like you, really, and you can take these opportunities and do that." And that's probably never more needed, because work experience for young people has really been affected by the pandemic. I mean, we have been doing it online, but that involves the young person still not leaving their bedroom and with their computer. So they're not actually whilst they're getting an idea of what happens in the workplace, they're not getting an idea of what it feels like to walk through the door and how to have a cup of tea with someone or speak to someone in the workplace, or, just join in the things that happen in offices or at shops or other buildings, So yeah, it's something that's got harder, and young people are really lacking confidence at the moment, and you can see that with the lack of applications for some of the opportunities that are there.
And I wonder, actually, I'm going to leap back to Steve now, because actually, if he's had the reputation of always doing stuff online, have you found it a plus or a minus, people getting your culture, Steve?
I haven't really thought about that, but obviously we do find with online we have to have a change in skill set, So obviously we're encouraging our team and others to get more communication skills. If you look at what we do now, we're using Zoom and Teams, things like that, to communicate. So it's a new form of communication. Some people are familiar with it. The youngsters are brilliant with it. So. It's a moving world, isn't it? So I think we just have to reflect what we need to do to get on better, and this sort of form of communication is to be, promoted.
Yeah, it is that funny, that moving world. We're never going to get there, are we? It's this continuous improvement and trying to do new things in different ways. But just thinking about our young, because it is so important, isn't it, to make them feel welcome and that they're not moving into an alien environment, and getting them job ready. Again, Simone, you've been down knocking on these doors again. So what have you been saying to the Minister?
So one of the things we're highlighting was the research that we've been doing with Teesside University, which is about the new traits of leadership. We've been round-tabling that discussion that started with the amazing Dr. Jane Turner. And we said one of the questions that we brought when we round-tabled only about 5 or 6 weeks ago is the fear of young people. There's a fear of young people at the moment, and we need to trump that fear with hope. There's a worry. Jane talked about confidence. We're seeing that over and over again. We've enabled 8,400 plus conversations between business people, business leaders, and business, people within the pipeline to pay it forward and to give time to have a conversation with young people. Just bite-sized, nothing too in-depth, but we have to keep doing that. We've had lots of these where the screens have been off and we've thought, oh gosh, is it this or that? It's confidence. So we have to just try more, and that's what we've asked for. We want that support. We want to myth bust about what the world of work is, and we need to innovate, and we need to keep talking and keep listening. We need to really listen. That was one of the biggest traits that we got from the survey that we did with young people. The most important trait of leadership for young people is listening.
And that just connects straight back to what Jane was talking about, in fact, in terms of welcoming those young into her office and saying, actually, this is better than the job centre, this is easier. Jane, go on, tell us a bit more about this, because I know that you've really pioneered stuff. I mean, you've got young people involved in things they wouldn't normally be involved in at all.
Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to break down that fear. So we've had programs with schools where they come in one afternoon for just an afternoon, and then what we always want to do with them is we want to give them real work, because one of the things about work experiences, it can be quite patronizing. You can go in and you can watch someone do a job or something, but actually the best way to learn about a job is to do it. So we've taught them skills about how to answer the telephone, how to write a letter, and we've given them files and said, see what you want to do with this, what would you do with this? And we've talked to them, and we've also realized that actually young people don't want to deal with old people like me. They want to deal with younger people. So we've used our trainees and we've used our young solicitors to work with these young people, because they're less intimidated, and they talk the same sort of lingo. And that works really well, because actually what you're doing then is you've got a double benefit, because not only is the young person feeling more comfortable, but actually you're giving some leadership skills to your trainees and your young solicitors. So our trainees ran a murder trial with a load of school children through the High Tide Foundation in our offices, which went all the way through to a verdict. And the young people, after a bit of coaching and encouragement, were actually the advocates who took this trial through to its fruition. And actually, once they got into it, they absolutely loved it, because they forgot they were thinking about law, and they just got involved in the story as if it was a soap opera or a television program, and all of a sudden their verbal skills and their speaking skills were, they were amazing, and it was incredible what they could actually do. And it's just giving them those opportunities, but thinking about, there's all sorts of things you have to think about, little things. The first time we did it, we laid on lunch for them, and actually then we realized that actually they needed a break from us, and we were better off giving them all a voucher to go around the corners to Greg's and get their own lunch and having a breather. And it's just things like that make young people comfortable, and I think we all need to try and look at work experience and look at helping young people into the workplace from their perspective, and that's quite difficult to do, but it's a really important aspect to it, to give them confidence.
And just before I move over to Steve again, because it's that whole thing, and do you get the feedback as whether that sort of innovative work with young people actually translates into giving young people, it actually opens a door into another door so that they actually go on and get a job, because that's what we want, really, isn't it? Jane, just before I move back to Steve.
Oh, sorry.
Does it translate?
Well, we do know that because we have seen we're beginning to see from our program that's a good few years old, some people now going into university or coming into our workplace. So we are getting applications for jobs from people who have been work experience students with us. So yes, we can see that we can see these people on their career path. Yeah.
And that's a great virtuous circle, isn't it? Steve, to you, you used the word innovation. You said that everything was always moving. You've got to keep up. You've got to keep up with your competitors. I'm quite sure that you're doing similar but very different things to get those sort of continuous improvement things and opportunities working through your pipeline and then into practice.
Yeah, like Jane, I think we bring in school leavers, we mentor people, we take part in academies and all sorts of things, and like Jane, we do find that the younger people blossom in our environment, and go on to do great things, and even if it's not their chosen career, as you say, they're getting into a workplace, they're sampling that environment, getting used to a 9-to-5 type of role. And we also benefit from them as well, because sometimes they do meaningful work, but they also ask daft questions, which turn out not to be so daft. So it's great working with all different age levels. And like Jane said, we've got younger people and some older people like myself. So yeah, we do find that they respond to different groups, But I think the other thing is they're applying technology, they're seeing like what we all do, so it gives them the opportunity to assess whether it's for them or not. And that's why I wish I had that when I was a youngster, So yeah, it's all good stuff.
That's why I really wanted you to talk about your business, because it's a really exciting, building virtual digital platforms of socking great big structures. You get anybody could if you could give people the opportunity to see that and see that there's an opportunity, they'd think, right, well, how do I get nearer accessing that? And I was thinking again, about the levelling up agenda, Simone, and about all of you, and what the Prime Minister has said. This is of real relevance here in the Tees Valley, because there is a lot of the Tees Valley, that's a long way behind, and it's got to work for everybody, hasn't it? So actually, hearing that employers here like Jackson's and you at Phusion are actually reaching out further into the pool and saying, this is what we do, come and have a look, is great.
I think, can I just chip in? Another thing is that we've got some of us the leading companies in the world doing what we do, So as you say, we've got this fantastic opportunity on our doorstep. So bringing youngsters and anybody else into that environment, females and the like, it's just extraordinary, a great opportunity, So we have got like diamonds on the doorstep,
Diamonds on the doorstep. I think that's a cracker. Diamonds on the doorstep, but it's actually, they need to know that the doorstep's there, and I think from what you're doing, you're showing them, and you are doing your bit, which is actually, you're taking lived experience, aren't you?
It's the storytelling, isn't it?
It's the storytelling.
That's what we talked about. Every story, every part of that levelling up report, I talked through with the Minister, I talked through with Number 10, I talked through with MPs. We sent the report to every chief exec, every leader of a local authority, every influencer, because we want to be advocated for. We don't, we want to, because the sum of all the parts of what everything does all adds up. And that's, that's what we do. We took every single piece of the report. There's a great woman in the Tees Valley here called Laura Hepburn, Greenology, sort of had a real dip through the start of COVID. All of a sudden she learned how to recycle wind turbine engine blades. And now she's recruiting up to 50 people of every level. It's those stories we need to storytell. I'll be storytelling about what Steve does. I've always storytelled about what Jane does because she's amazing. So we need to keep the stories, and we need to bust those myths, don't we?
Yeah, and I think that's why the sessions like this really are quite important, because statistics hide it. What do they say? There's fact, there's fiction, and there's statistics, and there's a whole load of sort of smoke and mirrors, isn't it? Actually, if you get behind that, so what's the story on the ground? The story on the ground is that really innovative businesses here in the Tees Valley are, yes, they might be having short-term job vacancies, but actually they are looking to find the people that they need for the future, and they're doing it in the most innovative way possible. You're knocking on national doors saying, hang on, we need to get more people involved in this and talking about it and telling stories, because otherwise the diamonds won't be able to find the doorsteps. I love that analogy. I think that's absolutely great. I have a feeling that we may be getting quite close to time. Are we, boss? Right. So I think probably it is time to say to you all, unless you want to, or actually no, I'm going to invite you to do something a bit different. If you had a sort of magic wand, and if you thought this is from your perspective, if you had a magic wand from your perspective, and you were able to make jobs relevant to, what would you do to really lift all of the ships possible, let us say, in the Tees Valley in terms of economic opportunity? What would you do?
Who are you asking?
I'll ask you first.
Okay. Well, to be honest, the things we do at the moment is, building these digital twins. It's now current. There's BIM. Building information management. There's digital cities. There's some massive things going on in Saudi Arabia with 500 billion investment. It's all really mega stuff. So what I would do is for a young person, where do I want to go? Engineering's not that attractive, but information management is, and virtual reality and things like that. So what would I do? I'd like to be able to present the world that we see to the younger people in the region. So at least to know what we do and what's available and where the industry's moving. It's not oily rags anymore, So that's what I'd like to do, is because we say here is how do we reach the younger people? How do we get them to see that there's a fantastic career? And some of it's brand new, and there's only a selective bunch of people know about this geeky stuff. How can we communicate this so you get more young people wanting to get into our industry? And that's the big problem with engineering, is getting young people into the industry. It's not seen as sexy. But some of the stuff I see is brilliant, really, really good and cool, So I'm thinking, how do we sell that message? How do we let them see what can be done?
Well, you tell your story, and you've started that here today, so that's absolutely cracking, Steve. Jane, what would you do?
I would expand mentoring massively so that all of those young people get someone to talk to. And it might not be in the area where they end up in their career, but just someone who's in the workplace who will talk to them as an individual, show an interest in that one person and say to them, well, why don't you do this? Or you could come with me to this, and just open the world up a bit for them and give them some confidence by holding their hand and taking them out into the workplace so that they can see what the world is like. It's like Steve says, we need to show young people what is happening in the world. I think all they hear in the press at the moment is what's not happening in the world and what we're not allowed to do, but they need to know what is happening in the world. And I think a massive army of mentors going into our secondary schools could do that.
And give them the eyes to see opportunities like at Phusion and others. And you, Simone?
Everyone who mentors should also then, or receives mentorship, should then mentor on and create it a cascading kind of movement. But what I would do with my magic wand is make sure that every board, every influential panel, every association, we don't want to level up, we want to balance up. We don't just want one woman on the board or one person of colour or one young people. We want to make sure that where the decisions are being made for the future of the region, for the future of the North, for the future of gender equality, they need to be balanced, not just tokened.
Well, I tell you what, gentlemen and ladies, what a cracker. Thank you so much for prioritising time to join Business Unmuted today. Thank you, Steve, for your diamonds on the doorstep and for bringing your story alive to the region's young. Thank you, Jane, always for sharing some of the really innovative stuff that you've done and will continue to do, and continue acting as a mentor. And thank you, Simone, for being able to, through your social media network, which is probably already going bonkers, taking this discussion, helping take this discussion out there and getting it to the people who need to hear what's being said, because trees aren't just any good. Trees are no good if they just fall down in a wilderness and nobody hears them bang. This has been great, and I hope, everybody, that you will join me again, not Graham, next week, same time, same sort of place, i.e. Recognition PR studio, but with different individuals for a different discussion. Thank you for prioritising the time to listen. And if you haven't listened yet, remember you can catch up on podcast on Spotify or Apple. Thanks again.